speaker is Jayden Budiman. Jayden is a lifelong learner who's fascinated by the intricate workings of the world. He aspires to create a happier, fairer, and kinder future for humanity. As a junior at ACS International, Jayden runs the 21st Student Council Debate Society and Quiz Bowl Club. In his free time, you'll find him reading or playing more Quiz Bowl. And today, he will be presenting his question under the field of business. What if winning meant losing? Which sounds really confusing, yet intriguing, right, Caitlin?
Yes, this question is certainly an interesting one, and I'm eager to know what he has to say. Can we please welcome Jayden to the stage with a warm round of applause?
Okay, so I want to start off with some imagination. So imagine this, my brother Jacob and I are late to Envoy CC, and I'm sure Mr. Cope and Ms. Sen in the crowd has experienced that a lot. I'm really sorry for that. But anyway, since we're late, and it's the third time this month, we have to have a punishment. But Mr. Cope and Ms. Sen are fair teachers, they're fair judges, juries, and executioners. So before handing out our punishments, they have to figure out who's truly at fault. So how do they do this? They take us into two different classrooms and say to each one of us, they say to me, and presumably they're saying the same thing to Jacob, look, Jayden, if you snitch on your brother and you say that he's the one that made me late to Envoy, he's the one that distracted me, he's the one that convinced me that it's okay to be a little tardy today, and he stays silent, I'll take that as an admission of guilt, and he will get a full day of Saturday detention, and I will get off scot-free. But if we blame each other, and we both say the other person distracted me, then they'll know that someone is lying, but because they don't know exactly who's lying, they'll have to give both of us just 1 hour of Saturday detention. But if both of us decide to stay silent and refuse to sell each other out, then they'll have no evidence, they have no idea who's really at fault here, so they'll have no choice but to let us both get off free, but with a very stern warning. But here's the catch. If I'm the one that stays silent, and Jacob's the one that blames me, then that means I'm the guilty one. I'll get a full day of Saturday detention, and Jacob will get off scot-free. So you can see it's probably something a little like this. Yeah, and we're really sad in our two separate classrooms. So here, I have a very simple decision to make. Do I betray my brother in an attempt to protect myself? Or do I cooperate with him in an attempt to reach the best possible outcome for the both of us? I think a lot of you guys will immediately notice that what I'm describing is a really common illustration. It's a thought experiment called the prisoner's dilemma, in which two people must decide between betrayal or cooperation without knowing what the other person will choose. Essentially, and here you can see I prepared a handy little diagram for you guys to look at. If both of them cooperate, then both of them get a good outcome. If both of them betray each other, both of them get a bad outcome. But the catch is, if one person cooperates and the other person betrays, the one that cooperates gets the worst outcome, so presumably you get 10 years in jail, while the one that betrays gets the best outcome. So here, presumably they get 0 years in jail. Now before I move on, I just want to throw it back to the audience. Let's try and see what you would do. I want you guys, on the count of 5, to turn to the person next to you and shout to them or just tell them which decision, betrayal or cooperation, you'd make if you were the one in this situation, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, betray or cooperate. I just heard a lot of betrays out there, and to be clear, I take no responsibility for any ruined friendships over that. But anyway, I just heard a lot of betrayals, and I just want to talk about that for a moment. I think as humans, it's incredibly intuitive to immediately jump to betrayal, or rather, non-cooperation. And why is this the case? And I think the answer is really simple. From the standpoint of human psychology, it feels like always betraying is the correct move. It feels like if you betray the other person, you put yourself in a better position to win. Because if you betray the other person, the worst that can happen is a tie. But if you cooperate with the other person, the best that can happen is also a tie. So logically, it feels like whenever we face an instance of a prisoner's dilemma, whether it be in life, in school, or in the workplace, we should always choose the path of non-cooperation. Unfortunately, this kind of decision-making process doesn't really translate well into the real life. And the reason why is because as you can see by this infinity symbol, life isn't a one-off prisoner's dilemma game. Life is what we call an infinite game. We face the same people, the same teachers, the same friends, the same classmates over and over again, day after day after day. So in a way, it's not one prisoner's dilemma, it's a series of repeated interactions within the framework of the prisoner's dilemma. And I'm here today to argue that in such a system, in life, it is always better to cooperate. My name is Jayden, and this is my case for cooperation. So, how are we going to find our answer? I think what's really useful is someone smarter than me has found the answer. So in the 1980s, this is exactly what political scientist Robert Axelrod wanted to figure out. He ran a computer-simulated game in which game theorists, the nerdy mathematicians that deal with this kind of thing, submitted different strategies to play each other in a series of prisoner's dilemma. And the rules were very simple. Essentially, if both cooperated, if both strategies cooperated, both strategies would earn 3 points. If both strategies betrayed each other, both strategies would earn 1 point. If one strategy betrayed and the other strategy cooperated, the cooperator would get 0 points and the betrayer would get 5 points. And essentially, all of these strategies would play against all the other strategies for 200 rounds each. And what Axelrod wanted to find out was, in a world of repeated interactions, in a world much like our own, what kind of strategy actually yields the best outcomes. So let's take a look at some of the strategies that were submitted to Axelrod's sort of tournament. So some of the strategies that were submitted were incredibly aggressive. So strategies like always defect, always defected. They never cooperated no matter what. And this made it so that they never lost a single round because they just kept betraying you, betraying you, betraying you. And the worst that can happen to it is a tie. Other strategies were more reactive. This looked like strategies like retaliation, for example, which started off with cooperation, but if it was betrayed even once, it would resort and switch to betrayal for every other round. So with this kind of strategy, you only got one chance. And other strategies were far more complex. They ran hundreds of lines of code, trying to outsmart, trick the other strategy into cooperating while it secretly betrayed in order to maximize its own point payoff. But when the results were compiled, a really interesting and I think unintuitive pattern emerged, which is that the most successful strategies, the strategies that accumulated the most points across all of the rounds of the prisoner's dilemma, weren't the ones that were the most aggressive. It wasn't the ones that were running hundreds of lines of code of prediction. It weren't the ones that tried to retaliate in some way that tried to maximize its own gain at the cost of the other strategy. Instead, the successful strategies shared 4 very simple, but I think difficult to pinpoint difficult to get traits that I think are incredibly useful in life and also in business, as I'm going to explain later. So let's take a look at those traits. Before I go on to the first traits, does anyone want to take a guess at what the first trait was? Maybe our really kind organizers? Any guesses? Okay, I'm not really sure. Yeah, I was also not sure. It's okay. So, the first trait was that all successful strategies were nice. And that is to say that successful strategies never struck first. They always started off with cooperation. And this meant that it opened the door to systems of mutual benefit with the other strategy. So instead of being locked in games where they would go betray, so 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, they would go into rounds with systems of cooperate, so 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points. And this was really useful for them in accumulating as many points as possible. But there's a second trait too, and I think this is equally as important. Anyone want to take a guess? Okay, last chance. I'm not going to ask the next one if nobody responds. No one? Okay, yeah.
Don't be a doormat. Don't be a doormat.
Don't be a doormat. Correct. Wrong slide. Ah, yes, don't be a doormat. So essentially, successful strategies, although they were cooperative, although they were nice at first, if the other strategy started defecting, started betraying, it would also respond in kind, and this was a signal. It reflected that I'm not someone to be walked all over, I'm not someone that you can exploit. Any type of cooperation has to be mutual and has to be two-sided. The third trait that I think all successful strategies shared was that they were all also incredibly forgiving. And this meant that perhaps the other strategy betrayed it once, but after the other strategy returned to cooperation, it was also willing to return to cooperation, and this meant that single mistakes didn't ruin the whole relationship. Single instances of betrayal didn't mean that the whole round had to be ones of vicious cycles of retaliation. And lastly, successful strategies were also transparent. And what this meant was that they were easy to understand. And if they were easy to understand, that means that the other strategy can also know the rules of the game. It was able to trust it. It was able to form systems of cooperation around it because it wasn't volatile. It was something that was seen as trustworthy and understandable. So, I just threw a lot of theory at you. I just threw like some really abstract results from an abstract tournament. But I think if we take a look at these traits and reflect on them, we'll see that a lot of them also apply well in the real world. They're also best practices for interactions with with other people in real life. So number one, being nice is useful because if you assume the best in other people, opportunities will open for you. People will want to cooperate and work with you. Secondly, being retaliatory and firm is also important because in life, just like in a prisoner's dilemma, you'll face nasty strategies that always want to betray. In those instances, you have to be willing to retaliate and signal that you're not someone to be walked all over. Thirdly, being forgiving is also important because people make mistakes all the time. People miss deadlines, they act selfishly once in a while, but just because one mistake happened, it doesn't mean that the whole relationship has to end with that mistake. And lastly, transparent is also important because without transparency, people don't trust you. You're seen as volatile, and if you're seen as unpredictable and volatile, people default to the safest option, which is betrayal. So, how does this relate to the business world? How does this relate to the business world? So, I was asked to give a talk on business, and when I reflected on the prisoner's dilemma and the takeaways that you can glean from it, I think it's incredibly applicable to how we run systems of like business and how we run partnerships in the real world. So I want to take a look at the case study of Apple and IBM in 2014. So to set the stage, in 2014, Apple and IBM were two huge tech giants that dominated the tech industry. But at the same time, they were competitors, so they weren't at all friendly with each other. But both of them faced problems that the other could solve. So for Apple, they had fantastic personal devices like iPhone and iPad. Who has an iPhone or iPad right now? I'm sure all of you guys do. But the problem was that most of its sales were going to individual consumers. It didn't have a distribution network to larger companies. IBM, on the other hand, was selling and it had a lot of clients from big corporations, but it didn't have any of its own hardware to sell. So here you can see they had sort of their own prisoner's dilemma created, right? If both companies chose to stay separate, if both companies chose to keep their technology, their knowledge, their distribution channels separate, then both of them would miss out on the opportunity to benefit off of each other. Both of them would miss out on the opportunity to grow. If one of them shared their information, but the other didn't, the one that shared the information would essentially be exploited because it's giving away value without getting much in return. But if both cooperated, that is a win-win situation. Apple would be able to access IBM's clients, and IBM would be able to offer its clients Apple's products, which would obviously make those clients incredibly happy. So, what do you guys think Apple and IBM chose? Did they both choose to betray or like not cooperate with each other? Or did they choose to, did one of them choose to cooperate, did one of them choose to betray? Or even better yet, did both choose to cooperate? Who thinks they both chose to betray each other? Those greedy capitalists, man, right? Who thinks they chose to cooperate with each other? Okay, I appreciate those people at the back. You are correct! They chose to cooperate with each other, and both of them are better off because of it. So, what does this mean beyond Apple and IBM, beyond Jacob and I, beyond Ms. Sen and Mr. Ko? When I was first asked to give a TEDx talk on business, the first thing that I immediately started reaching for was competition. How to be more competitive, how to be the best in the industry, how to beat out the other guy and win this game of capitalism. But I think what Robert Axelrod's tournament and what the prisoner's dilemma teaches us is that often in life, to get the best outcomes, You don't have to be the most competitive. Instead, you have to be the most cooperative. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here's some numbers for you to think about. Okay, well, anyway, I remember those numbers. 70% of Zoom's business comes from its partnership ecosystem. 95% of Microsoft's revenue also comes from its joint ventures. And lastly, when interviewed, 94% of tech executives say that their first move when they want to break into a new space is to find a partner to do it with. So as you can see, collaboration, cooperation, and mutual benefit are things that are becoming far more popular in the world of business. And it is reflected in the way that we think about the prisoner's dilemma, and it is reflected in the way that we think about the best decisions to make when faced with such a situation. So, I just want you guys to remember this. Whenever you find yourself in a prisoner's dilemma of your own, whether it be in school, in the workplace, or perhaps when you're running your own business or part of a business, always remember that in order to get the best outcomes, in order to win in the long term, you have to be able to accept losses in the short term and cooperate with each other. Because what if it is the case that in order to win, you have to first lose? Thank you, everyone. That was my case for cooperation. And if you don't mind me, I have a 1 hour detention to attend. Thank you.
Wow, Jayden really went in an extremely unexpected yet provocative and refreshing direction, enlightening us on the discrete strategies hidden underneath the surface that businesses truly use, which I'm sure many of us weren't aware of before.